Welcome students in our next section of chapter stats where we are going to study about collection of data. Before going to take any decision, we must have data and it's very important to students that from where we are collecting the data. Basically, there are two types of data. First one is primary data and second one is secondary data. Now first, let's study about primary data. What is primary data? Data that has been collected from first-hand experience is known as primary data. Or we can say when an investigator collects data himself with a definite plan or design in his or her mind, it is known as primary data. For example, like experiment, research. Now come to sources of primary data. Sources of primary data are limited and at times it becomes difficult to obtain data from primary source. Why? Because of either scarcity of population or lack of cooperation. But still, regardless of any difficulty, it is the most authentic and reliable data source. The first source is experiments. You know, students, experiments require an artificial or natural setting in which where we have to perform logical study to collect the data. Experiments are more suitable for medicine, psychological studies, nutrition, and for other scientific studies also. In experiments, the experimenter has to keep control over the condition of any external variable on the results. Now, the second one is survey. It is the most commonly used method in social science, management, marketing, and psychology to some extent. And also, survey can be conducted in different methods. First method is questionnaires. Second one is interview. Third one is observations. Now, questionnaires. It is the most commonly used method in survey. Questionnaires are a list of questions for which the candidate give answers. Questionnaires can be conducted via telephone, mail, live in a public area, on a road, or on any institute, through electronic mail, through fax, or any other method. Now, interview. It is a face-to-face conversation with the candidate. In interview, the main problem arises when the candidate hides information. Otherwise, it is an depth source of information because we are able to extract anything from that candidate until unless he or she control himself or herself. The interviewer can not only record the statements the interviewer speaks, but he can observe the body language, expressions, and other reactions to the questions too. These things are also help us to make decisions about him or her. And at the same time, this enables the interviewer to draw conclusions about him or her easily. The next one is observations. Observation can be done while letting the observing person know that he is being observed or without letting him know. Right? Observation can also be made in natural setting as well as in artificially created environment. For example, we can say we want to find how many cars pass by a certain point on a road in a 15-minute interval. Now, what is the best way to take out a solution for this? So simply as that, what we do is stand at that point on the road and counted the cars that pass by in that interval or in that meantime. Might be there were 2 cars, there were 4 cars, or we can say there were 5 cars also. But by observing the given thing at a specific time, we can take out the right or exact answer for this problem. Now students, importance of primary data. Primary data has not been published, yet it is more reliable, authentic and objective. Why? Because primary data has not been changed or altered by human beings. Therefore, we can say its validity is greater than secondary data. Importance of primary data cannot be neglected at all. Why? A research can be conducted without secondary data, but a research based on only secondary data is least reliable because some of the human beings are very biased. It is very necessary to get information from primary sources and work on primary data. For example, let's say the statistical records of female population in a country cannot be based on newspaper, magazine and other printed sources. One, such sources are old, and secondly, they contain limited information as well as they can be misleading and biased also. So we can say primary data is the best way to collect the data. We can define the importance of primary data in 3 terms. First one is validity, second one is authenticity, and third one is reliability. Validity. It is one of the major concerns in a research. It is the quality of a research that makes it trustworthy and scientific. It is the use of scientific methods in research to make it logical and acceptable. If we are using primary data in research, so students, we can improve the validity of research also. First-hand information obtained from a sample that is representative of the target population will produce data, and that too will be valid for the entire target population. Authenticity. It is the genuineness of the research. Authenticity can be at stake if the researcher invests personal bias or uses misleading information in research. Otherwise, there is no chance at all that we have fake information. We must take care about the same. Primary research tools and data can become more authentic if the methods chosen to analyze and interpret data are valid and reasonably suitable for the data type. Primary sources are more authentic because the facts have not been overdone, or we can say overlap. And reliability, it is a certainty that the research is enough true to be trusted on. For example, if a research study concludes that junk food consumption does not increase the risk of cancer and heart diseases, this conclusion should have to be drawn from a sample whose size, sampling technique and variability is not questionable. In a similar manner, if the researcher uses experimental method as well as questionnaires, the results will be highly reliable. On the other hand, if he relies on the data which is available in books and on internet, he will collect information that does not represent the real facts at all. Now comes to secondary data. What is secondary data? Data collected from a source that has already been published in any form is called as secondary data. The review of literature in any research is based on secondary data, which are mostly from books, journals, periodicals, magazines, newspapers, etc. Data which are not originally, or we can say, or in more classical manner, data which are not originally collected, rather obtained from published or unpublished sources are known as secondary data. Sources of secondary data. Secondary data is often readily available. After the expense of electronic media and internet, the availability of secondary data has become much easier. Let's say students, if we have to make an assignment given by the teacher, then what we will do, we just take out the textbooks and simply switch on to Google. Google is a vast source of information, and with the help of Google and textbooks, we can easily make our assignment. Students, there are so many ways or sources of secondary data. Now first one is published printed sources, published electronic sources, unpublished personal records, government records, and public sector records. Here we will study about one by one. First one is published printed sources. There are variety of published printed sources. Their credibility depends on many factors. For example, on the writer, publishing company, time, date, when they were published. New sources are always preferred, and old sources should be avoided for obvious reasons, because of technology and researchers bring new facts into light. Now we can collect published printed sources through books. As we know, books are available today on any topic that we want to research. The use of books starts before even we have selected the topic. After selection of topics, books provided insight on how much work has already been done on the same topic, and we can prepare our literature review. Books are secondary source, but most authentic one in secondary sources. Remember students, books are most authentic one in secondary sources rather than websites or anything in secondary sources. Now second one is journals or periodicals. Journals and periodicals are becoming more important as far as data collection is concerned. Why? The reason is that journals provide up-to-date information which at times books cannot, and secondly, journals can give information on the very specific topic on which we are researching, rather talking about more general topics. The third one is magazines or newspapers. Magazines are also effective, no doubt, but not very reliable. Why? Because we have seen in some cases the information can only be obtained from newspapers, as in the case of some political studies only. Now our second source is published electronic sources. As internet is becoming more advanced, fast and reachable to the masses, it has been seen that much information that is not available in printed form is available on internet nowadays. In the past, the credibility of internet was questionable, but today it is not. The reason is that in the past, journals and books were seldom published on internet, but today almost every journal and book is available online. Some are free, and for others you have to pay the prices. With the very best example, what you are doing, that is e-learning. In the past, we were not able to study like this, like we are studying right now. But nowadays, through internet, through e-learning concept, we are able to study anything, anytime, matching with our comfort zone. Now in this, The first one is e-journals. E-journals are more commonly available than printed journals. If we have to find out anything on any topic, we simply switch on to our internet rather than going to a library or talking to a teacher. Latest journals are difficult to retrieve without subscription, but if our university has an e-library, we can view any journal, print it, and those that are not available, we can make an order for them. Second one is general websites. Generally, websites do not contain very reliable information at all, so their content should be checked for the reliability before quoting from them. Weblogs. Weblogs are also becoming common. They are actually diaries written by different people. These diaries are as reliable to use as personal written diaries. Now the third one is unpublished personal records. No doubt that some unpublished data may also be useful in some cases. The first one is diaries. Diaries are personal records and are very rarely available, but if you are conducting a descriptive research, then they might be very useful. The N.F. Frank's diary is the most famous example for this. The diary contained the most accurate records of Naji wars. The second one is letters. Letters, like diaries, are also a rich source but should be checked for their reliability before using them. The next one is government records. In this, census data, population stats, and second one is health records. Also educational institutes records. In this, we can take the example of HRD of India. Last one is public sector records. They should be collected from NGO survey data or other private companies' records. Now, importance of secondary data. No doubt, secondary data can be less valid, but its importance is still there. Sometimes it is difficult to obtain primary data. In these cases, getting information from secondary sources is easier and possible also. Sometimes primary data does not exist at all, but in such situation, one has to confine the research on secondary data only. Sometimes primary data is present, but the candidates are not willing to reveal it. Then again, in such cases, secondary data can survive. For example, if the research is on the AIDS patient, first, it is difficult to find out AIDS patient, and second, they may not be willing to give information you want for your research. So you can collect data from books or other published sources. Dear students, it is a very easy section in the entire chapter of stats. Thank you so much, and let's meet in our third section where we are going to study about presentation of data. Till then, take care.